Could I ask everyone to stand, please? We're going to have our Kamatua Tami Pokaia to carry out a blessing, and he'll be followed by the Very Reverend Phil Wilson, who will do a reading to open the council meeting.
Thank you, Lance. Atamari e kia koutou ngā kai kaunihira e te koro matua e tēnā koutou katoa I tēnei ata āhua makariri. Good morning on this rather chilly day. E te atua kaharawa. E tēnei mātou e whakawhetai ki a koe kia uhia te korowai o te aloha ki runga I tēnā o mātou e huitahi nei roto I te kaunihira o kirikiri roa. Arahi mātou I rungi te tika me te pono. Whakatau mai te aroha, te rangi mārie, te tumanako, I rungi I te koromatua, me ngā mema o ta kaunihira. Koe nei mātou e whakawhetai I tēnei rangi, I rungi te ngoto mātou kai whakaora, o ake, Amen. Tēnā koutou.
Good morning, everybody. A reading today from among my collection of jottings. These days in which political correctness has become the principal method for determining the morality of human interaction, people who are willing to take up the burden of responsibility for the well-being of society tend to come in for a steady stream of criticism. This is not the kind of welcomed criticism that offers different perspectives and alternative solutions, but the criticism that just condemns and finds fault. So for those of us who have felt from time to time perhaps a little unfairly judged, a few words from one-time American President Theodore Roosevelt might help. He wrote, "It is not the critic who counts, not the one who points out how the strong person stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the one who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, and who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who does actually strive to do the deeds. The one who knows great enthusiasms, great devotions, and who spends themselves in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if they fail, at least fails while daring greatly."
So thank you very much, Tami Pokaia, and also the Very Reverend Phil Wilson, and thank you for your wise words from your own writings. And I just particularly want to thank you both for what you've done over the last 2 years, or nearly 2 years now, and just supporting us at the opening of our council meetings. I do appreciate it, and I do believe that you bring a spirit of peace into the meetings and set the correct tone before we start. So I just want to thank you very much for all you do. Okay, I declare the council meeting, Hamilton City Council, Kirikiriroa City Council meeting open at 9:40 on Thursday the 6th of September 2018. We have apologies. I'll hand over to the Democracy Manager, Leanne.
Kia ora everyone, and this morning apologies have been received from Councillor Taylor, and I believe Councillor Bunting you have...
Yes, I may, I'm trying to get out, but I may have to sneak away about 1:30 until about 2:45. Yeah, so Leo, you're in charge until then. Thank you. Need to leave about 1.
And I'll probably need to leave about
3.
Thank you.
Okay, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Gary. All those for, any against? Carried. Confirmation of agenda, Democracy Manager, Leanne.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. There's a few things to note in confirming the agenda this morning. Firstly, that the proposal is that the debate will be 2 minutes with an extension of 1 minute if required. That the order of the agenda will follow as per your run sheet in front of you. It deviates a bit from the agenda that was distributed. There is a replacement, attachment 1 for item 11, which is the Waikato Regional Economic Development Agency Partnership Agreement that was previously circulated to elected members, and you have a copy of that on your desks in front of you. There are 3 late public excluded agenda items to be added to this agenda as proposed. One is C9 District Licensing Committee appointments. It's a verbal report. It's late to provide for discussion of DLC appointments not able to be had in the open section of the meeting, and the reason for PX is to protect the privacy of natural persons. There is a late item on public art resolutions. The reason for lateness is to address events which have occurred since the agenda was distributed, and the reason for public excluded is to prevent disclosure or use of official information for improper gain or improper advantage. The final late public excluded item is C8, purchase of land and buildings resolutions. The reason for lateness is to enable timely release of information of public interest, and the reason for public excluded is to prevent the disclosure or use of official information for improper gain or improper advantage. Thank you, Mayor Andrew.
Moved by myself, seconded by the Deputy Mayor. All those for, any against? Carried. Declarations of interest. There are no declarations of interest. Public forum. I'll hand over to the Democracy Manager.
This morning we have 2 speakers in public forum. Can I ask Warwick Mitchie, Mr Mitchie, if you'd come forward to the presenters table. Mr Mitchie is representing himself, and he is speaking to the late item on public art. Mr Mitchie, you have 3 minutes, including questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Ms. Warwick, your 3 minutes is on the bottom right-hand corner of the
Gotcha.
Bell will ring at 2 minutes, and you will be expected to finish at 3 minutes.
No problem.
The 3 minutes will include any questions if there are any.
May I say first off, I think that the opening prayer and address by your minister is fantastic. I think it's really something to take to heart. Haven't heard as good a speech made up by somebody like that for a long time. What I wanted to speak briefly about in the matter of public art, and that is the matter that happened out the front here, and that was the damaging of a statue out the front here, which happened a very short time ago. May I say I'm surprised and possibly even somewhat disgusted that the person who did this was not charged, brought before the court and made to pay for the damage that he caused. He's not even from Hamilton, he's from out of town. I've been a ratepayer in this city for 40 years, and I had to pay for somebody to repair something or pay for the damage that he caused out of my rate money that I paid. And he causes criminal damage and does it. I think that somebody who comes into a public place with what could be called an offensive weapon, a hammer, a claw hammer, if you go walking up and down the street here with a hammer like that, I'm quite sure that somebody from City Safe would ask you, what the hang do you think you're going to do with that? But nobody did that. He also brought a TV crew with him, so it was a really structured thing to do. I wondered why that person didn't come before this committee, sit in this same chair that I'm in, and address you people on what his thoughts were, instead of taking the law into his own hands, committing criminal damage, and walking away with it with a bit of publicity for a cause or for his cause. I think his role modelling before his own people is terrible. If I turned around and did that, I don't think any of you would expect to go out and do that sort of thing and expect that you to be a role model for your young people, for the young people here. What you're doing here is what you believe is the best way to run something like that. I just think the whole thing was so orchestrated, so done, and I think the man should have been charged and brought before it, and I don't know whose decision that was, either council, the council itself, councillors here, or the police. It somewhat disgusts me that the man could walk away free with some, advertising for what his cause was. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Our next speaker this morning is Christine Norris. So if you'd like to come forward, Christine. Christine speaking to item 11, the Waikato Regional Economic Development Agency Agreement.
Thank you, Christine. So your time is on the bottom right-hand corner.
Okay,
You have
thank
3
you.
minutes, including questions, and I will stop you once we get to 3 minutes. There will be a
Absolutely.
bell ring at 2.5 minutes.
Fantastic.
2 minutes, sorry.
I also felt very encouraged by the Reverend his talk, because I certainly have come under criticism for my enthusiastic approach to doing good for the world. So anyway, what I'm talking about today is the scope of the partnership agreement with the region. And I have some questions about what it will include. And I'm wondering, will it include combined efforts to address waste, landfill alternatives, recycling? You know, we've got a plastic mountain growing in the region. Will it provide a united voice to lobby government to outlaw some products? Because this council, like all councils in New Zealand, are paying for the cost of manufacturers making profits. And I went, this is on my heart today, because I went to listen to Kate Meads. Now, if you don't know who Kate Meads are, your council, like every council in New Zealand, is paying her to give presentations all around New Zealand. So if you have never heard her speak, then I really encourage you to go and listen to her. Her topic was waste-free parenting, which I thought was a little unfair to put the blame on women and especially mothers. So we have to get beyond that. But the myths of recycling, you need to understand we really need to understand what's happening there. Even if it says recyclable, compostable, once it goes into landfill, it is mummified. It doesn't move on from there. Southland has increased their landfill by 20% in the last 12 months. That means with a doubling time, that means in 3 years they'll have need twice as much space.
1 more minute.
Oh, I've got 1 more minute. Oh, my God. I'm on a roll now. Okay. So the burden of recycling has been placed on ratepayers and consumers, but the rightful people to be held responsible are the manufacturers. And we need to address that. And I'm asking that this council would lobby government to outlaw these products that you cannot dispose of. It is costing a lot of money and it's not away. You know, I saw the rubbish truck leave my street, and you know, the black plastic bags, it has not gone away. It never goes away. It's going to be mummified in a pit. In 1,000 years' time, you'll be able to dig it up and find the same things in there. Kate Meads talked about composting bins in the community. I built one for you, and you maybe take it down, but I've got a promise in a letter that you'll put one back.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Okay, item 5, page 6, confirmation council open minutes from the 16th of August 2018. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Mark. All those for, any against, carried. Confirmation of extraordinary council open minutes 21st of August 2018, item 6, page 15, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Gary. And confirmation of the elected member briefing note, open notes 23rd of August 2018, item 7, page 18, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor James. All those for, any against, carried. Chair's reports, item 8, page 21. I just want to point out to elected members that there are changes to that as discussed yesterday at yesterday's meeting, and that will flow through over into the next council meeting. So that meeting you will understand, having been at yesterday's meeting and reading this, that things have moved on very quickly on since this was written. Councillor Dave.
Sorry, thought Gary's.
Councillor.
Look, I want to ask a question about the civic portraits, and I was just wanting to check that the Deputy Mayor, my good friend Councillor Gallagher, didn't have a potential conflict of interest being put in charge of this area, given that that one more term after this, he will be qualifying for a portrait. So I'm thinking it's a bit dicey if he's going to be in charge of putting his own photo up. He might get one from about 20 years ago when he looked significantly younger, for instance.
I'm struggling to find a question out of that. And,
sorry.
if you want to reply, you can wait.
That I'm in good health and do another term. The point I do make is those portraits go up after the particular elected member has left, like the mayor's. It could very well be that a future council may take a totally different view of history than this council, so who knows. But thank you for your helpful intervention, Councillor McPherson. Your sincerity is deeply appreciated.
Councillor Angela.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Andrew. I was just, none of this this is what we do now, so nothing's changing. So I was just wondering why you are bringing it into a report.
This is the only opportunity that there is for the Deputy Mayor to be able to bring something to Council to make it very clear to members on what we do and why we do it. So that's why this paragraph's...
Yes, and it started under Julie Hardacre because there was a group. We started, you know, the first 4 women councillors. In the past, we've just done the mayors after they left office, but it was felt that with the long-serving, and let's take James Baird. A number of you went to a hell of a fight when James Baird was a young city engineer, and if you look at those photos there, all of those people, with the exception of Councillor Deans, I've known personally, of course, but all of them have made an incredible contribution in their own way to city history, just as much as, say, a mayor. So that's what you're right, Councillor. It's just confirmed. The different bit is we've just added that we just wanted to give you an update. That's
I just didn't think it was necessary. I mean, Mayor Andrew, you're absolutely entitled to appoint the Deputy Mayor or whoever to something like this, and I just hope you don't feel like you have to be reporting these things. I have the utmost faith in the Deputy Mayor. He's very passionate about these kinds of things and I fully support him. But
well, I'm very glad your faith is much higher than a previous councillor who's previously spoke.
Oh.
Thank you. That's all.
It's warranted.
Done.
Deputy Mayor, you must be very old to know all those people and all those
I
photos.
didn't know Councillor Deans, but I knew people who did know him, so there you go.
Okay, moved by myself, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All those for, any against? Carried. Item 9, page 23, will invite Robin Denton to the table, please. So this is the deliberation and adoption of the Hamilton City Speed Limit Bylaw 2018. We'll take the report as read, and if there's anything you want to highlight, Debbie, go ahead.
Sorry, Andrew, we've gone black on our screens.
That's all right, your one in front of you is still working.
So, no, I'm happy to take the report as read and to answer any questions from the members.
Thank you. Councillor Gary.
Thank you. Thank you. What are the significance, and I struggled to, I read the thing and I couldn't quite figure out, what's the difference between something being kept in a schedule as opposed to in a register?
So basically what it does is move the information from being within the bylaw and therefore requiring to be changed to go through a special consultative procedure, so it unhooks it and has it referred to instead. So what that means is that we don't have to go through a special consultative procedure every time we change something in a register.
So just clarify that I think what you're saying is some things are the same until addressed.
The bylaw, the way the Local Government Act works, any change to the document that's called the bylaw has to go through a special consultative procedure, and that takes us in the order of 6 months. By moving the list of the speed limits, so that's the part that we're taking out of the schedules and putting into a register, it sits alongside and it decouples those two. So it enables us to make changes to the registers via resolution. Any change to the bylaw, which will now be the first 3 or 4 pages only, will still need to go through that special consultative procedure as the bylaw. So it in effect makes the bylaw, 5 pages long, and that is the only part that would have to go through special consultative procedures to be changed.
So the bylaw will say the speeds on our roads shall be as per the register.
Correct.
And you don't change the bylaw, you change the register.
Correct.
What's the schedule?
We won't have schedules anymore.
So is the difference just that schedules are not changeable?
The schedules for
Are the schedules
part of the bylaw, correct.
as opposed to the registers which are an annex to the bylaw which
Yes.
can be changed?
Correct.
Thank you. Is that the way
all stuff works in local?
It's something that we've had in place for our traffic bylaw, and we do changes to that for our parking, various bits and pieces through Councillor Angela's Regulatory and Hearings Committee.
So it's done because it's it's an efficient way of doing material or immaterial changes to something that's not fundamental to the whole
Correct.
thing. Okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Would you see our Access Hamilton task force, which Councillor Bunting will be chairing, as the main? I'm just trying to work out, the governance oversight of this as it progresses, because obviously what I think I'm reading is a more nimble, adaptable system.
Correct. So in parallel to this process, we've got the development of a speed management plan, and that's been talked about through the Access Hamilton Task Force, and we've had a couple of workshops on that. That plan will set out the council's key principles, and that will include consultation and engagement, but also set out the principles around how we're going to set choose speed limits, but also the engagement and engineering work that gets done. So it's speed management as a whole, not just speed limits. And that will set out a 3-year plan. And that provides the guidance through the Access Hamilton Task Force, and then enables us to work through the rest of the process.
Obviously, speed limits. Think about rural, peri-urban roads, and Waipa, Waikato, particularly Waikato with the growth of these lifestyle blocks. And while they're not technically in our border, we've read just the other day of an awful tragedy.
2 of them yesterday.
In fact, if I recall the report noted that school children had been there just previously. What I'm trying to zero in is, what is the level of our input and discussion with Waikato District Waipa? Because obviously I'd argue that while it's not in our patch, we should be taking a very keen interest in those peri-urban issues because of just how we've got the classic lifestyle block, but we don't have the sort of classic urban facilities.
Yes.
It seems to me, I'm just trying to how close, what potential do we have to have a 3-district approach? I think we're doing it.
So there's a couple of opportunities that we have. There's for any change in a speed limit, there is a requirement through the speed limits rule to consult with your adjacent neighbours. So whenever we do a change, whenever they do a change, we've had the opportunity to submit on that. And Hamilton City has submitted several times to Waikato District and around speed limits like K Road and that Osborne area. So that's one formal way. The other way that we're working together is through the regional speed management working group.
Yes.
So that's under the auspices of the Regional Transport Committee. And so we're working very closely with both Waikato and Waipa around their changes and how they fit with ours, because we do have several roads where the legal boundary actually runs along the middle of the road. So we actually need to, in order to make the changes sensible, we need to do that together. And the change that we're proposing to the bylaw to have the registers and do it by resolution will enable us to also work far more quickly with them as well.
No, thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Rob.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the detailed report, Robin. I guess the streets that are identified are those that are sensitive either with residents or with schools and other reasons why we want to drop the speed limit. Coincidentally to this report, councillors Mark, James and I met with some residents from Martin Street, McNichol Street and Rumney Street last Friday, and I see all three of those streets are down as a 40k sort of area, and quite clearly from those residents, and one of those streets is an entrance to a local secondary school, and quite clear evidence from the residents that the 40k limit was not being regularly adhered to. How can we, I mean, and this list, I suspect for the dates, this list is growing all the time in terms of streets where we are reducing the speed limits. How can we effectively enforce this? And I know it's a resourcing issue, both for us and the police, but, you know, can we put some work plans into place that will help convince these residents that there's regular enforcement going on to...
So I think there's a couple of things that we can do. So as part of the work of rolling out the 40Ks, we did look at trying to do minimal interventions. So we've always been happy to hear from residents and have subsequently gone into several streets and, for example, marked the 40K on the road. So road marking has been a really effective way of providing a reminder to people. Yep. So that's one of the really easy first steps that we can move to. We are also able, through the discretionary transport program, to look at whether there's opportunities for doing some additional physical works, for example, to reinforce it. Basically, what we need to do is hear from the residents. So it is a squeaky wheel type approach. So we're happy to take that on board, and we will certainly look at it. The other thing that we do is the speed limit. It's the speed trailer we put out, so that actually has a radar and is telling people and reminding people what the speed limit is. So, so that's something that we are also. We have a schedule, and again, it's as a result of requests from the residents, from councillors. Provides a program for actually taking that trailer around, or trailers around, and doing that sort of work. And certainly when we get regular complaints from an area, we do notify the police. If we can provide them with a little bit more information, is it a certain time of day of week, that sort of thing, it just enables them to be slightly more effective with their crews through the area to see if they can have that discussion. And you're confident that the police do respond to your requests to monitor those particular... I mean, in this case, certainly the time of day was quite critical of school starting and school finishing, which is when they felt that, you know, the compliance was not being adhered to. Yes, and we do, as part of our schools program, we work both with our parking enforcement team and the police around school gate type activities, and the police are very happy to reinforce why we have a 40k around these locations, and it is around child safety and people moving across roads and that sort of thing. So, so they're more than supportive of that. Okay, and do we get buy-in from the schools? Because yes, I sense from this group perhaps there wasn't as much buy-in as there was, I think, when James and I went to Knighton School a month or two ago, and we had the principal involved in the discussions there. For that particular school, which I believe is Dio, we have been working with them on an ongoing basis around the parking issues that residents were having. When the residents had raised those with us, we worked with the school, and they are putting information out through their various newsletters and that sort of thing, and reinforcing to students and parents the need to comply with parking legally. So yeah, I think... So you're quite comfortable your work plan is appropriate, it doesn't need further resourcing? We're certainly looking at getting some additional resource into our schools coordinator. So currently we have one person looking after all the schools in the city. So we are about to go and recruit for a second, and that's as a result of the Access Hamilton Transport Improvement Program. That's one of the areas that we're looking to do some more work.
Okay, thanks, Robin.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you. So I think I heard you answer the question before, but I just want to check that I heard right. So in terms of where those tragic accidents have recently occurred, it's fair to say that we have been in touch with the District Council on a number of occasions through submissions and other staff-to-staff engagements around the speeds on that road, haven't we?
Not those roads exactly. So my understanding is that the two fatalities that occurred yesterday, one was Osborne Road, which is fully within Waikato District, but we had been in contact with them on K Road.
Yes, that's
and
right.
certainly at a staff level are looking at what does the regime in that general area look like, because there is a school up on the top end of Osborne Road, Horsham Downs. So we certainly had been in contact with them. Korematua Road, we hadn't spoken to them directly. Again, it's right on the outskirts of the city, but that was more part of this general regime through the speed management guide and implementing lower speeds on those types of roads. So part of an 80 or 60, depending on what the residential sort of development is adjacent. So it's part of the greater scheme, particularly through the regional work.
Okay, because I think taking up on Councillor Gallagher's comment about peri-urban, I'm wondering if there is opportunity to push this a bit harder through the Regional Transport Committee, for example, because that's exactly where we're seeing a number of issues, the interface between urban and rural, and of course people don't see boundaries in the same strict, people who live in those general areas don't see boundaries quite the same way that we do.
Yes.
And I think, you know, it's a matter of urgency to tackle some of these. So I wonder if there is an opportunity to give it a bit of a push, especially at a regional level around the Safer Speeds program, to recognise the peri-urban issues that we face and cross-boundary methods, because, you know, we're always reacting.
Councillor Paula.
That's a question. We're already reacting.
Councillor Paula. You get to the question, please.
I have asked the question. You know what the question was.
No, you're strongly running into opinion, so a question.
The question was about the mechanism of the Regional Transport Committee. I think you understood that. Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
I'm happy to answer. So the RTC, the Regional Transport Committee, have been very interested in the speed issue, and most recently wrote to the Associate Minister requesting a blanket lowering of speed limits in the rural areas to 80 or 90. And the last RTC meeting on Monday considered the response from the Associate Minister. There was disappointment, I think it's fair to say, Councillor Dave, because Councillor Dave was round the table, around the response that we received, and there was general agreement that this continues to be a key focus and to be critical to achieving a lowering of road deaths, both in the Waikato but also nationally.
Thank you. That was a very helpful answer to my question.
Councillor Dave.
Just further on that, from Monday's meeting of the Regional Transport Committee, there's probably the major discussion that we had was about the speed limits right across the region, but particularly in rural areas. And I raised on our behalf that fringe area around the city where there's a mix between, as Paula says, the residents and drivers on those roads couldn't give a rat's ass, basically, whether it's a district or a council road.
Councillor Dave, reframe that, please.
Couldn't give a rat's derriere. I think that's a term used by the Deputy Prime Minister recently about that. Sorry.
Excuse me, Gary. I'm taking this as an answer to the last question.
Yeah, it is. And we've resolved that there needs to be a regional response because it's too hard for the small district councils with hundreds of kilometres of road in quite different areas to pick them off in enough time to to actually make all their roads safe. So that's why we want a region-wide and preferably a nation-wide approach. The suggestion has been from, which was supported unanimously really by the councils, the other councils, that there be a default, rather than current default 100k speed limit, then you have to argue and go through processes like the bylaws to bring it down to 80, that the default speed limit for a rural road is 80. And if you want to put it up, you have to put the case for that, the reverse direction, to try and improve that safety outlook. Yeah, so that's, and we've asked for that to be on the agenda of the next regional council, the regional transport committee meeting as well, and to continue to be on the agenda, because everyone agrees it's a problem. But I did have a couple of questions. The speed trailer you mentioned, Robin, in the past we used to have access to 4 speed trailers. 2 were owned by the HCC and 2 by the City Council. I know when we visited the Alliance, they had just built a new one for us to use.
Correct.
What's happened? It sounds like we've only got one that's usable at the moment.
No, sorry, we have got several.
Okay,
yeah,
good.
Sorry.
All right, okay, that's good, because we're getting lots of requests, aren't we? And
We are.
they're all in play all of the time?
Yes, we keep them very busy, and we try to have a program. If we haven't got any specific requests, then we look back at where we've had ongoing requests, so they'll often come back for a revisit, and then we're able to respond to the ones that we get more immediately.
And thinking about some of the roads in our newer areas, there are some that are still designed as straight highways almost. What can we, the engineering or re-engineering to catch up, retrofitting is quite expensive for us, as Rob alluded to. What can we do to toughen up maybe the district plan or the design guides, manuals and so forth, to make sure that they sort of speed engineering to help reduce speeds is built into every subdivision from now on? Is there more work we are doing or can do?
So we did quite a lot of work through the last district plan review, and we have got requirements in there around designing those, particularly the local residential streets, to 40k. What we probably haven't done quite so well is actually capture those into the bylaw. So my aim, 2 parts through the speed management plan, is to have one of the key principles in that document is that the new residential streets will be 40, and that is part of in parallel to the 224C process, so that's where the developers hand them across and council legally take them on board as a public road, that we will gather up that list on a regular basis, and through the change in bylaw process, do a report to the Regulatory and Hearings Committee to get those streets included immediately into the bylaw so that we can get the 40k signage up. But we are certainly working closely with the development engineers, our planners and the developers to make sure that we get streets that are more reflective of that sort of 40k environment.
So that sort of situation will be improving as we go forward, yeah?
Yes, that's certainly the aim.
And sorry, and the last question I had is, you mentioned the ability now under the Access Hamilton budget that we've got to employ a second school travel person, staff member.
Yes.
Would you say that the passing of the full Access Hamilton budget as opposed to a 15% cut one has enhanced the ability to do that, to bring in extra resources in these areas?
I'm sorry, I couldn't actually say exactly where that 15% saving was going to be.
That's all right. Thank you.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you. Just very briefly, and that's been really helpful. With regards to the peri-urban roads, is there anything that we as a group of elected officials could do, perhaps with the other councils? Is there anything we could do to help speed that process along or give it more weight? Because it's now a very urgent issue, isn't it?
Yes, I think through the RTC committee there was some concerns being expressed by other councils about the difficulty they have as a result of the hearings committee, the hearings requirements to actually work through that with their community, and sometimes they're getting a lot of pushback, and they are I guess, uncertain and feeling a bit hesitant about actually going out there and potentially taking some more adverse reaction to that. So I think that any support that this council can give to our neighbours around the fact that, you know, we really do support them in lowering speed limits on those sorts of roads, and certainly a reflection of yesterday's 2 fatalities would be appreciated by them as well.
Okay, so and just finally, where exactly are we at with K Road now? What's the timeline on that limited?
So K Road, we will be looking to put a 60 in there as a temporary to help with the trucks that are going to be going through for the building of the expressway.
Yep.
We are really waiting on Waikato District, because they own half the road, to take that process through, and that's where I think there's a really good opportunity for this council to reinforce our desire to see at least K Road, but probably, you know, actually looking at something sensible in that greater Horsham Downs area, the Osborne roads and those sorts of areas as well, to be dealt with, and then we'll be able to, assuming that we sign off today's report, we will be able to, through a resolution, incorporate our 60k requirement for
so
K Road as well. So we really are waiting on Waikato District.
Okay, all right, that's good for me, thank you.
Moved by Councillor Dave, seconded by Councillor Leo. Councillor Dave.
Need to speak to it, thanks.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yeah, very good report, and I just want to say, obviously ties in as part of the, you know, this great safety program. Thank goodness this budget was not slashed. We survived it through the LTP process. I'm so grateful, because that means you can do all of this. If you cut the budget, then you chop this in half. What I do think is it's really important that through the Access Hamilton and the committee that Councillor Bunting will be chairing in future, is that we should actually have a proactive discussion and form our thoughts around what we think are safe. And of course, you've got this juxtaposition of, you know, where do school kids walk down a footpath or a side of road of a 100k area? And the tragedy would be is that we wait, or the district or all of us react rather than be proactive, because it's just on a probability random. One day there could be a terrible tragedy, because the problem, and this is again with respect to Waikato District, you know, when you do all these lifestyle blocks, you do a sort of a low density urban environment, but you still have rural road speeds for farmland, but it's basically sort of low density urban, then this is a whole sort of combination of problems. But I'm going to urge this council to work with Councillor Mack at the regional level, and Leo and Bunty and others, to sort of perhaps do a bit of what, you know, so that we have a series of thoughts ourselves, and as you say, we do go in to help Waipa and Waikato District, because it's our people on the roads. It'll be some of our kids, dare I say it, visiting or walking down, and particularly very interested, you know, around the school population. And while we've got the 30k or 40k outside most schools now, you don't need to be a rocket scientist just to talk about the kids walking and drivers being, you know, I mean, to me, to have a kid walking down a road with a driver doing 100k is a contradiction in terms. Thank you.
Councillor Mark.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. To me, this is where the rubber hits the road when it comes to Vision Zero. I know we talked with Harry the other day and had a really good submission from him regards that. It's an approach that the whole country is looking at taking on, which is really great. But the pointy end of it is what we saw yesterday with 2 tragic deaths on our city fringes. It's unacceptable as far as I'm concerned, and I'm delighted that the staff are working so jolly hard within the system we've got to do whatever they can. It's just where the growth is outstripping our regulatory structure, if you like. K Road will be interesting. I'd like to take this opportunity to urge Waikato District Council to show some cojones and protect all of our residents. If that doesn't move you guys, then nothing will. And I'll be banging on your door as hopefully Chair of Access Hamilton regularly. I will be the irritant to these guys. So anything I can do to help staff along to speed that process up will be great.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Robin. Look, this has been a long time coming, and actually I think this council has been one of the most forthright councils in trying to get our speed down and get our city safety on track here. Look, a lot of our fatals have been on the edge of our city. It's on the boundaries, it's on the roads that go into 50k and 80k and around there. And we spoke to Harry the other day, who said that our national total of deaths on the road is tracking towards 400. Now, a lot of it is speed, and I'll remind you that each fatal accident costs around about $4.2 million, and that's not in social costs as well. A serious injury accident is $786,000, and a minor accident is $82,000. So if you have a look at that, 400 deaths a year, it's going to cost the taxpayer in New Zealand around about $1.68 billion just for deaths in New Zealand, which is unacceptable. So it's really good that we're taking this step to get our speeds down, so if there are accidents, they are more survivable. And we have to work closely with the regional council, or sorry, the district council, to get our speeds down in those other areas, because yeah, the tragedies from yesterday are not right. And you know, I've been to 2 deaths out at Gordonton Road on my time when I was in the police. One in 2007, where a lady was T-boned at Thomas Road. There was another one in 2010, which was actually a police pursuit, and there was an inspector at the time called Leo Tooman who had to deal with that, and he had to deal with all the aftermath of the Police Conduct Authority and everything else dealing with that. And of course, we've had the other one on Gordonton Road in 2018. So look, great work, Robin, great work to your team, and you know, let's get these speeds down as quickly as we can.
Councillor Leo.
Come a long way since 1904, when we had a speed limit in this country of 8 miles per hour, and prior to that the man had to precede the car with a red flag. Historically, of course, what's happened is every city in New Zealand was a 30 miles an hour initially, then a 50k restricted area, and every borough in New Zealand, like Cambridge and these sort of places, was a 30 miles an hour or 50k gazetted area. And since those days, of course, everything has sort of changed. I think what we're actually getting now is an appropriate speed for that particular environment. And if you can get the speed correct for that particular environment, people will be self-enforcing. One of the problems I always find is that people want a very slow speed on their street, but not on the adjacent street, because it will actually slow them down on their way to work. I think one of the issues we've got is that it's very difficult to actually tell people how to drive their car or bring up their kids, because we are all experts on driving a car and bringing up kids, even though we don't have any training for it. But I think what we've really got here is an appropriate speed for the environment which we're travelling through these days, and hopefully we can get every residential area in the city as a 40k and around our schools as a 30k, and then have our arterials as around about the 60k's. So it's really about giving some and taking some, and if we can actually show to the community that we're going to give them a little bit, we can also take a little bit at the same time. So I'm very much in favour of this particular, and well done, Robin, to the work that you've put into it over the years.
Paula, did you want to speak before?
Just, sorry, a couple of things came up.
Right of reply.
Yes, yeah, and I thought should be commented on, and Leo's just made another important point about the future of slower speeds. It's not just the speed limit that's going to help, it's the education that goes around it, and therefore hopefully the change in culture that comes as a result of that. And we want to have our residents think about safety before they think about how long it's going to take them to get from A to B. I think it was Harry that mentioned the other day that if you change the speed limit from 100 to 80 over a certain stretch of road, that they were having a lot of complaints from people who didn't want to lower it from 100. It would have taken drivers 30 seconds longer to get from that A to the B that was mentioned, and how much trouble was that going to cause them? None at all in reality, but the perception was a problem because our culture is a problem. So if we can work back from the start in the cities and work out, it's good. The other thing I wanted to say was that some of you may have noticed, I know the Deputy Mayor did, an article from Auckland Council, or centred on Auckland Council's move to start looking at these things the other day, and I laughed about that, the lack of attention the media's been paying really to Hamilton, having been doing this sort of thing for 15 years since we had the 40k outside every school in the city, and started bringing in 30k's in some commercial areas. About 5 or 6 years ago, we said no street in the city is going to be 100k streets. They're all 80 is the absolute maximum for anything in the city, and a whole lot of initiatives like that, with more to come, obviously, that Robin's been doing. For all of that time, Robin and the others have been working on that at Auckland Council. Good on them. They're finally catching up. I just wish that there would be some more attention to the good attention that this council is paying to road safety.
All right. And I just want to thank staff and Dave and Leo for the work you're doing in this area. We'll go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried unanimously.
We'll now move to item 10 on page 82. Debbie, and thank you. We'll take the report as read. If there's anything you'd like to add, go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. So this report highlights really that things have changed since negotiations started, and what that comes down to really is that when both parties went away to do the due diligence, the commercial terms didn't work for either party. Happy to take any questions.
Okay, so sorry, Debbie, I didn't introduce you as the Commercial Services Manager for those who are watching, and could you introduce your...
Scott Copeland, Procurement Manager for Council.
Thank you.
Yeah, I must be, Gary.
No, he's not new. Okay. Councillor Ryan.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Debbie. Just on that tender, or perhaps Scott, what was, or where was that financial oversight that obviously came up later down the track?
I think when you look at the tender, it was part of a wider thing that looked at potential around outsourcing both Waterworld and this facility at Sportsdrome. It was a request for proposal process that took it to a certain level. But there was always the realisation that needed to be more due diligence around finalisation of any commercial arrangement before it would go ahead. That hasn't worked for either party at this stage, but that's just the normal contracting process, and I think it's better to recognise that now than get into a commercial relationship that doesn't work for either party.
Sure. And the need to re-tender, is that just for the Sportsdrome, not Waterworld? Is that being separated out in that arrangement?
So at the council meeting in December last year, it was agreed that Waterworld would remain in-house, or aquatics would remain in-house, and that we would look at outsourcing to Rapa Sportsdrome. So if council decide that they want to continue looking at the outsourcing model, then staff can continue to look at those options. Yeah.
Okay. And at the moment, are you going back to market with this opportunity, or are the tenders that missed out, are they still in the market, or?
Yeah, so we just have to look at that. That hasn't been finalised yet, so we'd need to work through those details.
Cool, yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Rob.
Thanks, Chair. This model to outsource some of our community facilities, as I recall, is relatively new. Does this one kind of put a little bit of a dampener on what we might do with other facilities that we've got around the city that we still manage in-house?
It's a bit tricky for me to answer, but I think we need to be realistic about what we can achieve. Yeah, and I think that there isn't always cost savings to be made, and yeah, yep. So that's just something to be mindful of. Yeah, okay. In my opinion.
And notwithstanding that, I think as we've discussed before, it's about looking at different options and it may not just be a straight contract out model. It might be, a partnership, a bit like we've got with the Peak, with the Rototuna High School, Ministry of Education, a trust running that. So obviously, you know, we're working with the university on the money that the council's put in the LTP. So look, there's all sorts of models out there, and I think, you know, I'm quite confident that we can actually really look at those different options and then bring those back to council. So it may not just be a particular, you know, traditionally outsourced model. I think there's a number of different models out there now that, you know, there's some really good ones, and not just in Hamilton, but right across New Zealand. So we're always, you know, talking to our colleagues in other parts of New Zealand too about how they work. And, you know, I think the peak has been, you know, it's only been going a year or so now, but I think it's a pretty good model. And, you know, I'm probably a bit biased, but it's generally it's getting good utilisation, getting good community buy-in to it. We're getting all parts of the community involved there, and a whole range of different physical activities and other things as well. So I think we're in a good space in Hamilton, and look, we have a close relationship with private providers, you know, like Fast Lane, YMCA, those sorts of organisations. So I think we're in a good space in Hamilton to actually, you know, horses for courses, find the best options for each facility.
Okay, just while you're talking about that, Lance, we've got, as far as I'm aware, we've got 2 which have been successfully outsourced, the Fairfield Hall and the Age Concern Centre. Are we getting feedback as to how well, and I know that they're different to this model because they haven't got commercial organisation involved in either of those, but are we getting feedback as to what the challenges are around the outsourcing, and what the challenges are, and what good is coming from those from the model that we've adopted in those 2 cases?
Yes, look, I'm not close to it, but having spoken to Jade Murray, who sort of runs that, and with Andy Mannering, look, the normal challenges are popping up around community groups that run those facilities, about getting the right people and that sort of thing. But that hasn't been, you know, a major problem or anything like that. It's probably the opposite. We're getting a lot of people who are really happy with what's going on. So I think we're getting some really good models there, and it probably links to when Bev Gattenby did the review of community development, the community-led development, and it's sort of almost that approach as well around some of our facilities management. So I think we're heading in a good space. Look, we're not getting a lot of complaints, and quite often that's sort of my sort of litmus paper test. So things are looking reasonably good.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dave.
Yeah, thanks. Debbie, would it be fair to say, or Lance might want to answer this too, that Te Rapa Sportsdrome is a particular problem? It's not generic to others in terms of the fact that the building wasn't built by us and it wasn't fully fit for purpose before we had to take it over after it fell apart financially, and that it's sort of got a lot of residual maintenance and upgrade issues that have taken place. So it's sort of, I guess, it's different from anything else we own in that respect.
What you say is true, but I think we have a lot of other buildings that are like that too.
Have we, ones we've taken over, or ones we built ourselves fit for purpose from the start?
ones that we've taken over. Yeah, similar issues with other buildings.
Okay, thanks.
But I think from that, the positive from that is we've learnt from those sorts of things, probably the hard way. But I think it's good to take the learnings, and then we can actually be better going forward.
Okay, moved by myself, moved by Councillor Paula, seconded by myself. We'll go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried unanimously.
Okay, we'll now skip item 11 for now, with the leave of the members, and come back to it. We have a presenter who isn't available yet, so we'll go to item 12. So we'll take the item as read. And is there anything you'd like to add, Jen?
Bear with me.
I'll just give a brief introduction and then the planner will be here to answer your technical questions. So this report responds to part of the resolution following the approval of the Te Awa Lakes Special Housing Area. You'll recall that 51 hectares of industrial land has been approved as that SHA. The resolution asks staff to look at the possibility of bringing land in the Te Rapa North area, which is currently zoned deferred industrial, online as zoned industrial land, basically. So this report sets out the state of play for that area and suggests that we take the next steps on this path. So those next steps are a clear understanding of the demand and supply for industrial land in that space, and an investigation of all of the infrastructure requirements. So before proceeding, really understanding what we're looking at for infrastructure for making that happen.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you so much, Jen, for that report. Look, just one question from the sub-regional perspective on page 113. There was no mention of the area around the airport. Is that part of that or not really?
Sorry, bear with me, 113.
No, this
So
is
this
stuff
is
that's
about
already
Te Rapa.
inside the city boundary, and that's well outside of our city boundary. That's in Waipa's area.
Yeah, but there's also a mention of Horatu and Huntly. That's outside, way outside, so just...
Lauren is just walking through the door and will be able to answer that question for you in just a moment. This is Lauren Brown. She's a principal planner in our city planning team.
Cool.
Sorry. Than I expected. So the question was, in the sub-regional perspective, we've talked about Horatu and Hautapu and Huntly, but not the airport area.
So I guess the you're talking about in the paragraphs from 36 onwards? Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are areas within the Waikato district that they've had the opportunity to update their district plan recently, so there are areas where they could have signalled some new growth. They haven't. At the airport, which is in Waipa, we are aware that there's some proposals in the pipeline, but nothing's been formalised yet, so hence I haven't mentioned it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Robb.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wonder why we don't see any merit in extending the industrial land out in Ruakura, given that, you know, there's land around Holland Road and Percival Road. We're spending a significant amount on infrastructure in that area, and that piece of land inside of Holland Road and Percival Road will be on this side of the expressway. And if we are confident that the Ruakura Inland Port project is going to become as large as we've been promised and as we expect, why industrial organisations wouldn't want to be located around there?
Mm. Yeah, I think that there's some caution over this Te Rapa North Deferred Industrial Zone. We think that it's a good place to change out, to lift the deferred zoning, but I guess we've taken some caution and that we're not just jumping straight in. So that wider sub-regional study that's also undertaken will be looking at some of these pockets of land and whether there's other places that we should be looking at as well, or instead of. So yeah, this is sort of I guess a holding report, and that we think this is a good place, but we'd like to check out our other options as well, and some of that sub-regional work will do that.
Okay, and that will also focus on what the expansion might be in and around the Ruakura port.
Yeah, and we can also look further south if we needed to look around, you know, Hamilton's other boundaries, perhaps around towards the airport or south. So we've got that. There's some other opportunities that we'd like to explore. But this was I guess if we were taking a simple view of it, it was a like for like. We've lost something else in Te Rapa North. Perhaps Te Rapa North is the place to replace it.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. Jen, you suggested a couple of things, doing some more work on the infrastructure.
Understanding the infrastructure requirements for that area.
And there was something else you said too.
And investigating the demand and supply, so that we investigating the demand and supply, just so that we really understand, you know, if we go down this road, will it be used?
Can those two things be added to the recommendation?
Gary?
Because
I have a motion that's about to go on the board that will cover what you're asking for.
Okay, all right.
I think.
Thank you. So, can you still answer the question? Is it because if there's a reason why we shouldn't do that, I'd like to hear that, but I can't see a reason why we wouldn't have those added to the recommendation.
That's fine.
What?
That's, oh, sorry, can you not hear me? I said
Yeah.
that's fine, that makes sense.
Oh, okay,
You can add
yep,
them.
thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Paula.
My question was going to be around the demand and supply, actually, and the timing of that. When will, and you're saying you're going to do some more work on this, but that it's fairly buoyant market. So, given that Futureproof, for example, predicted the timing and rollout of industrial land over a period of time, which has been reviewed, when will we get any data around what the uptake of industrial land is looking like, when we're going to need that industrial land and that's one of my questions anyway.
Well, we've done a lot of work around that already through the work for the NPS UDC. So that some of those, that table 1, includes some of those projections. The uptake work, we've got a figure here, and I'm just trying to locate it. We've got market uptake being 44 hectares in the last year, or since June 2017. That's in paragraph 19 there. So we've got a broad understanding of the uptake, but I guess it's just taking that a little bit further, investigating what's been uptaken, where do people want to go, and looking at that sub-regional uptake as well. So we have done a lot of work already. It's just about perhaps getting a bit more of a market commentary rather than data and figures so much, but just get more of a market understanding.
I think that's where I'm going with my thinking. We know what the trends are. There's been an increase in uptake of industrial land for certain types of activity, though there's not all the detail of that here. But what we don't know enough of is, business predictions and what, there's a sort of work, I suppose, that the previous item that we haven't yet discussed, the Regional Economic Development Agency might have some input into, what is the future of Hamilton's role in the Waikato look like as far as industrial land goes. And the other, so I'm really interested in when we'll get more of that, because as a question that Councillor Pascoe asked was about Ruakura, and we're still waiting to see some development in that significant. Will we get an update from them, for example, on where they're sitting with the development of Ruakura? That would be useful.
I can give you an update. I can give you an update offline on that.
Brilliant.
Or at a briefing.
Well, I don't know. Yes, are councillors interested in that? Because I am, yeah. The last question I have, please, is I would imagine that you've worked very closely with NZTA in respect to any movement of industrial land from where it was originally planned and its impact on the roading, and they're quite comfortable with the proposals.
Yeah, well, that will be part of we've mentioned the proposals, but I guess it's that investigation on the infrastructure requirements and impacts that would be.
Okay, so that's what you're saying, Jen, that would be part of the infrastructure requirements if there's an overburden on the state highway or additional requirements for interchanges and such will come into that conversation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Dave.
Thanks. I'd like to return to Councillor Siggy's question about the airport precinct and to query more deeply why that isn't sort of included in the sub-regional review, given that Southern Links roading and transport network is going to be connecting in several ways the whole of the southeast and southwest through to the airport, through to and including the airport, and they already have industrial land there, but there's the new boundaries of Southern Links or roading may throw up quite a few other options. There's some islands of land, for instance, in there, and the fact that there's finally, after many years of trying, they've now agreed to include on the corridor the indicative rail connection into that area. So can I ask, can you please actually include that on the basis of what Siggy asked? Because I think that should be looked at.
Yeah, sorry, perhaps I didn't answer the question clearly, rushing into the room. The airport is definitely part of the wider sub-regional study. So I think airport through up to Huntly, so there's a lot of land packages within there we'd be looking at. The airport's definitely one of them. The reason it wasn't referred to specifically on here is there's no detailed proposals around what's any changes or happening at the airport at the moment. I know there's something in chain. I'm not sure where it is. I think they do want some more land out there to extend the Titanium Park and beyond, but it's certainly part of the wider study. The future-proof implementation advisor, he's been speaking with the airport directly, so and some of the landholders out there. So there's definitely it's definitely included. It just wasn't covered specifically in this.
Okay, it's a bit concerning that you're not aware of some of the details, because at a submission to the public submission to the regional council transport committee, the general manager and chair of the airport company came along with an actual physical plan that showed some new industrial areas they were wanting to open up. They were indicative of the concept plans, not consented plans or anything like that. But
well, we have
it seems like that hasn't been coming through to our council. It certainly hadn't come through to Future Proof either until we raised it with them.
Well, we've certainly had a dialogue with Waipara about what's happening out there, but I haven't personally spoken to the airport company, but perhaps that's something to cover as part of that wider sub-regional review.
Thanks.
Okay.
Councillor Mark.
Question too.
Councillor Gary.
Thanks. Thank you, Andrew. And having seen the recommendation you've got up there, I still have just another question to ask. I fully accept that is where we're going. You know, that somewhere along the line we're going to look forward. You know, the 100-year thing's a bit waffly to me, but I understand what you're trying to say. But I just think there is a degree of urgency that we're dealing with here, which that doesn't address, because that will take years to get a resolution to what you're talking about, Andrew. I think we're talking about, urgent may not be the right word, but certainly a lot more immediacy than that suggests. So I would like to, so I'm happy with that, but if it could include also a more timely report back on infrastructure and demand supply metrics, which is a program we can work to in the next 5 years, 8 years, rather than what is very visionary up there. And I don't disagree with it at all, but I do think this needs to happen now, quickly.
So I understand, I think, what you're saying, and for this, a step along the way with this will be to work out exactly the supply and demand and what's required and what's not to give evidence for these outcomes.
Except I think that's about, I'm asking a question here because we're in question time. That is more about, I think, discussing with other mayors and whatnot. What we're talking about here is something that's more certainly within our district, and it's certainly more under our control, and it is required very quickly.
Is there something you'd like to add to the?
Well, I would just put
to the motion.
Kind of your wording, and if you could give me what you said.
So
about infrastructure and an analysis of infrastructure and an amount of required and an analysis of the demand and supply metrics. I don't know what the right wording is.
So to receive the report and complete the next steps. So the next steps are detailed in the report. They just haven't been put in the recommendation.
So is there something called next steps here?
Yep,
yes. Lauren's going to tell you what page it's
on. It's on page 115, number 51 and 52.
So this...
Superb, yep.
Yeah, so those two things are the next steps to fulfil this specific requirement in that resolution from Te Awa Lakes. There is another part to that resolution which is much broader, and a report is coming back to the next council meeting which deals with the things that you have on the board at the moment, Mayor Andrew. Which is a much broader conversation about the Hamilton Urban Growth Strategy and what do we need to be looking at going forward in the longer term around the edges of Hamilton, but how do we interact better with our partners as well. So this is the first part of that, and just specifically about industrial land in that area. And the second part of the resolution, which isn't in this report, it's in a report that's coming to the next council meeting, starts to talk in the direction that you're going.
Does this need to be future-proof? Can we do that?
Do which page?
Well, paragraph 51 talks about the future-proof work. I'm not a big fan of future-proof. I think we just do it within us, do it here. Our people can do it.
I guess the thing that future-proof brought us was a bit of budget to do it, but also that information that we need from those other councils around what's happening sub-regionally. So the airport, Huntly, Hauratu, etc. Gets us easier access to that information.
You know about phones and emails, don't you? And talking to people. Okay.
Councillor Deputy Mayor Martin.
Yes, obviously while I support in principle the intent of the proposed motion, I would give advice, and I'll just ask the Acting Chief Executive, it seems to be in the light of Jen's advice, in the light of our workshops, it would be a better process that we discuss this at the next council meeting. You talked about a report, it was related to the workshop we had.
Are you suggesting we have another briefing and then bring it to a council meeting?
No, I'm just saying in the content, sorry Jen, you talked about a report, can you just repeat for me?
Yes, so the second
of the content of the Mayor's motion.
Yeah, so the second part of the Te Awa Lakes resolution, the second piece of work in that resolution was to bring back a report about how we would approach reviewing the Hamilton urban growth strategy, basically, how we were going to look at Hamilton as a fast-growing area and how we were going to deal with a fast-changing environment in all of these spaces, in the housing space and in the industrial land space. So this was in two parts. The first part was to deal specifically with that industrial land question, and the second part was a broader report about the wider growth of Hamilton. So that report is being written at the moment.
My view is that these, if you pass this, these resolutions will actually give mandate to move things along, and I think we've had a pretty clear steer today to for things to move along quicker, and I think
so. There's
Gary
nothing there. I mean, obviously, in the end, when we move along, we have to do evidence-based. You know my views on this. Absolutely, I support this principle. It has to be stacked with local government commission, etc. So you're saying that this motion that will help move the process? Okay, I'll second it. Albeit I think 100's ambitious, but I'll second the motion.
Councillor Robb.
Ask a question, perhaps of democracy, on the motion now that it's been seconded. I'm just wondering if B and C are actually off point. We are discussing here deferred industrial land. I sort of thought B and C is perhaps a bigger and wider issue about our city boundaries, not only for industrial land, but also for residential and everything else. And given the discussion earlier on about maybe having a briefing to air the issues, because quite clearly B and C are there for a reason, perhaps we should discuss those outside of council meeting and then bring perhaps what we've discussed at the briefing forward as a much wider issue than this, which is on deferred industrial land.
So I'm not entirely clear on your question,
The question is, are B and C off point, given that this report is about industrial land, and B and C seem to me to be a much wider issue around the city boundary.
Yeah. So that's a judgment call for elected members. I think you could argue that the report specifies industrial land. I think perhaps it could also be argued that you can't look at industrial land in isolation from other land and boundary issues. So the ultimate determinant of whether or not the scope is too broad is for you as an elected body to decide. I don't fundamentally see an issue with it, if that's your question.
Thank you.
Now, can I just remind members we have had a briefing on this? So this isn't something that's come in cold, and that Councillor Gary.
Sorry, Andrew, I just challenge you. I just don't think that addresses quite what this is talking. I think we've got an immediate issue
which is the
Have you seen D, Gary? Have you got your head around D? Which is put there specifically on to cover what you were asking.
oh, has that just come up, is it? Is that has that just been added in? Oh,
Yes.
okay, no, I haven't noticed that. Notice that further work will be undertaken. Okay, yeah. Yep, okay, it's a bit open-ended as to what that further... Okay, so it's a report back that'll tell us what actually is required out there, because the feeling is that there's not enough industrial land. Is that right?
Really firming up further on what the report already says.
Okay.
Which the report's saying what the next steps are, but we put that in just to firm it up.
So that will be a roadmap towards opening up more industrial land. If you want to, so I think what this was trying to tell us is that, you know, for a whole lot of reasons, the Perry's thing particularly, we are running out of, and I think most of us are aware that there's a shortage of industrial land in the city. And I thought that the issue is we need to address that and say, okay, and that might be we need more information, but, and that's why I wasn't so flash on the initial recommendation there. But the D seems to approach it, but it's...
Yeah, we'll firm that up for you, Gary, and,
okay,
and put with particular on D, particularly around industrial land.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Do I take it, in the light of the Jen Baird's advice around the report we're receiving, because while I second and totally support this motion in principle, but obviously it's about evidence-based, so clearly you don't commence negotiation until we have all of our ducks in the row. I think we've got a lot of ducks. This is consistent, you know, with the previous council as well. But just perhaps to Jen and the Acting Chief Executive, before we start those discussions, and albeit I acknowledge the Mayor's had informal discussions naturally already, what do we need to do before we're in the starting blocks around some negotiation?
Do you mean in terms of getting the evidence together?
Well, it's easy to say. I mean, you know, I believe that our city should reflect our immediate community of interest, but that's a statement, it's a general statement. It's actually about, for it to stack and for a local government commission to say it's got merit, if we can't get agreement, then obviously there's that research and we have to have some clear evidence-based approach.
Yeah, so this is a project that Blair Bocott is working working on,
Yes.
and he has a number of people working on those sorts of pieces
Yeah.
of reporting
Yeah.
at the moment as well. You're right, there is a fair amount of work to do in order to be able to have those conversations. And off the back of the briefing that he gave a few weeks ago, he's had a steer from you in terms of going in that direction. So there are a couple more pieces to this puzzle. So I understand that this is where that these resolutions are where we need to go, and that's been clear. There are a couple more steps in that there is this report for the next council meeting that is being prepared at the moment that really speaks to this space in terms of how we go down this road and how we create a process in order to do that in the way that you're talking about, by getting our evidence lined up. So that what I'm saying, the long way around, is that we have a report that is in the process of being created at the moment that is moving in this direction.
So that doesn't contradict that report. It's just a matter of when we start the discussion, negotiation formally. By then we'll have your report. We'll have the work that we're supposed to be doing ourselves.
Yes, and potentially it means we have the resolution before the report that deals with that. But we're going in that direction.
So, Councillor Robb, are you happy with that change to cover your concern?
Yes, I guess I'd like to get an explanation, perhaps, Mayor Andrew, from you. I mean, it seems to me that B and C represent an attempt to get council to support a 100-year plan. And I get the feeling that perhaps you're not getting positive feedback from our surrounding councils, the two councils you've named in there, to sit down and discuss this issue. Is that the way I'm reading the reason for the motion?
There are discussions that have been preemptive discussions, but I need a resolution of this council to really empower myself and the Chief Executive to take these further to the next level. I mean, we need to be united on this. We need to have a majority of council supporting us looking at our boundaries, and that's what this motion's about. It's to ensure that you as council come on the journey with where we're going.
Yep, and I wouldn't doubt that there's anyone around the table that wouldn't support that. But I'm just wondering, could this be interpreted by Waikato District Council and Waipa District Council as a unilateral push to force them to sit down and discuss areas that they might feel a little uncomfortable about? I mean, we've got a 27-year plan with North. With the north of, you know, the further out we go beyond that, the more uncertain planning becomes. And 100 years, to me, just seems like, you know, an almost impossible task to plan that with a high degree of certainty.
As you know, we're hugely restrained, and there's other councils around New Zealand who can plan properly. You've got Christchurch, where you can drive up for miles in any direction. You've got Queenstown, you can drive for 3/4 of an hour to get to the boundary anywhere. They can plan properly. We are restrained. We've got the highest density of any infill of any, our density level is higher than any council in New Zealand by the closest other council to us. We're at 1,500 people per square kilometre. The closest other council in New Zealand is at 1,000 people per square kilometre.
I understand all of that, but you know, isn't it a persuasive thing to suggest to these mayors that we have got these constraints and that it's in everyone's interest, theirs and ours, to be talking about how we would expand our boundaries?
So those talks are already happening.
Yep.
But it's important that council support myself and the Chief Executive and Blair, who's just walked in, who's a part of those talks going forward, so that firstly is that you understand where we're going and what we're doing, and for this to go any further, I need the permission and a majority of this council to support those talks, or those talks are hollow words.
So then could we change B and C to take the word enters into discussion with the word continues in discussion?
Certainly.
And that suggests that it's part of something that's already, you know, I kind of read it as being, you know, and I don't know, I'm not party to the discussions that you've already had, but I'm reading it as, hey, we're not getting anywhere on this. I need a mandate from my council to go and pursue this option. Whereas I think if it continues, it already suggests to us that the process is underway and you've taken along now the support of your council.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah.
That as seconder, however, I would ask the Chief Executive or Jen, the 100 years, what in our planning form is a more meaningful frame? I mean, I think 100 years ago we were just finishing World War, well, you know, I can't get 100 years. I can get 30 years. I can get I'm just trying to think of what, again, this is what's stacking with local. The ultimate arbiter, Your Worship, will be the Local Government Commission. So I'm wanting wording that is stacking with them. So I'm going to ask the Chief Executive or Blair to give advice. It's not to muck up the motion, but it's just to get something that is going to meet those criteria.
Yeah, and just because those are my words, and the part of that 100 years is right now we've got land that's being subdivided outside our boundary in a way that will make it very difficult for us over the next 100 years as we bring that land into the city to deal with. And we need to be able to have at least a voice over that land to ensure that what's happening, which will inevitably come into our city, is manageable at the time. And we've seen outcomes around our city that are going to make it very difficult for us in the future. But I think it's probably a good time for Blair, who's been a part of these discussions today.
With respect, in 100 years, I hope we have a much better system of local government than we've got now. It shouldn't be beyond the wit of our great-great-grandchildren to do that. But could you just give us a realistic...
Yeah, can I just step back and then I'll answer your question, Councillor. So apologies, I wasn't aware this was going to pop up in the context of this item. So Jen and I have been planning a comprehensive report to the October Council meeting to capture what I would refer to as the Greater Hamilton conversation that we had at a workshop recently, and to address the matters that have been discussed now and to recommend appropriate next steps to go forward. And as part of that context, we're also going to proceed that with a briefing on the Hamilton to Auckland corridor plan project, which is another fundamental piece of work occurring between Hamilton City and Auckland City Council, and the corridor with the transport corridor. So I very much support what Mayor Andrew is talking about and very much understand exactly what Council is wanting to achieve here. This is how do we lay the foundation for the long-term growth and development of the area of the much bigger Hamilton. This is what I've coined the Greater Hamilton. I just think it would be good decision-making of Council to receive a report from staff that articulates the thinking and the rationale and the strategic context for you then to adopt those resolutions, as opposed to add those resolutions to the report today, which is dealing in just a very small part of that. So Mayor Andrew, Deputy Mayor Gallagher, what I'd be suggesting is that you don't take those resolutions today, that you let staff bring the report back to the meeting, which will articulate the rationale and thinking behind what we've workshopped, which is the Greater Hamilton, in terms of how we go forward. Notwithstanding that, Mayor Andrew and myself and the Chief Executive are having conversations with those councils, so we are not resting on our laurels. We are talking through the future-proof channel. We're talking through the Hamilton-Auckland corridor channel, the matters that Mayor Andrew is talking about. I just think it's good decision-making for this council to receive a report from us outlining the wider context, the thinking, the rationale, as opposed to potentially taking these two resolutions in isolation. There are a number of matters which we think we want to seek your support and mandate on. These two are part of it. But there's also some further work that we want to go away then do to put the meat on the bone to substantiate the detail. So, I would just possibly say don't take B and C today, but do understand that we will be bringing back a report to the next council meeting, which will be comprehensive and will provide the pathway forward and the rationale thinking for what Mayor Andrew is talking about. But rest assured, we're not doing nothing in the meantime. I'm having active conversations with the senior executives through the corridor plan, through the Wellington people, such as those driving the Urban Development Authority. I'm meeting next week with people around the special purpose vehicles. So these things are still happening, but I just think it's too early for us to get a council resolution. So sorry, that's a bit of a long answer, but I just think it's good decision making to have a report that substantiates that.
Okay, so I will withdraw my motion. It puts me in an awkward position in that I'm in the middle of active conversations with my mayoral partners and with other elected members. So the room probably needs to understand that those talks are happening regardless of this motion. But I'm in a position where I really have to withdraw my motion now.
No, what you do is B and C just hold over. They can be, because they stand, but you just help, our governance manager will help me. It's just that we hold those over, all right, for the next meeting.
I'm sure they'll come back in the next report as a recommendation.
I'll be happy.
Can I check, Mayor Andrew, before do we want to keep D, given the conversation today? And should it be in D?
So just as elected members need to understand that these talks are continuing without a motion on the board, but at least now you're in the picture, and So, Gary, do you still want D on the board?
Yes, please.
Okay.
It does need a date, of course, the XX needs
December 2018.
Beg your pardon?
December 2018.
When? In
Dave?
December 2018.
Well, that's changed things now, so I want to speak in the resolution, in the discussion, and I would have preferred that motion to have stayed in, actually. am disturbed by the process. That I'll wait for the governance manager and the mayor to finish, because I did want them to hear. I'm disturbed by the process that's been followed on this round this table in the last 5 minutes now, because I thought a resolution had been crafted and put up there, and to be honest, with all due respect to Blair, I think that we had a member of management giving a speech in the debate against the motion, which then caused it to be withdrawn, and I think that it should have been put, and I still support that. Now it's not even there for me to discuss. So I question the process that's just happened. I don't think it's been good process to do that.
Yes, it's put me in an awkward position.
I appreciate
Councillor Dave, but I...
The topic is, just remember what the topic of, I'm not disagreeing with anyone that these are important matters and they need to be discussed, but the topic is Te Rapa North deferred industrial land. So that's what we're addressing here. And the other stuff, my concern was that both things need to happen, and that the 100-year discussion would slow down anything on Te Rapa deferred land, industrial land. But I agree with everyone, except I just remember what the agenda item is this.
Councillor Dave.
My concern is that while this, Gary is quite right if you just look at the wording of the report, but the reason it's come to us is because of the problems that the Mayor has outlined and that his motion was coming. And the context for looking at why we need industrial land is because some council back in 1989 approved no land basically around the city. So, no, the motion was trying to address that and to give some legitimacy to the discussions that we all know are already taking place. So that's why I think that it was okay to do that now. And I don't think it actually, I don't agree with Blair that it causes any problems, because it's well known what's happening by the other councils as well. So, if it's withdrawn, and I'll just speak to the limitations of the motion without it in there.
Deputy Mayor.
I think I don't often disagree with my good friend Councillor McPherson, but I think in this case this is a process issue, and I think Blair has given us some very useful advice, and the last thing I want is a risk that a number of elected members are very uncomfortable and vote it down, because that, in my view, in terms of the broader cause, would be a disaster. I think we reconvene this discussion at our next council meeting based on the report, evidence-based, and obviously with respect. The ultimate arbiter of all of this in our term is going to be the Local Government Commission.
Okay, is there any further discussion, debate? Councillor Angela?
Debate, okay.
Yep.
So, yes, I'm happy to support A and B. I won't speak on the previous motion. And thanks for the really good report. It does concern me that we feel that, that the decision, and I think it did say it sort of a little bit in the report, that the landscape has changed sort of in the last 12 months. I don't think that it has. I think that this was just an unfortunate cart before the horse again. And I'm supportive of special housing areas, but they have all been, the applications have been in our industrial land. So we were making a decision before knowing all of the information, and unfortunately, you know, there's an unintended consequence here. So we're going to be faced with an additional problem in the future. So I thought the report was excellent, and I look forward to a lot more in-depth information on this, because we need to manage our industrial land and our employment opportunities for future very, very carefully. So excellent report, thank you.
Councillor Dave.
Look, I agree with the report and the motion as far as they go, but neither of them go far enough, because they don't put the wider context sufficiently. And Angela's quite right about the cart before the horse in terms of the SHAs, but we don't have control over when someone puts in an SHA application. What the problem has been is that we haven't had this wider look early enough. It should have been done some years ago, and we should have been ready to have these sorts of discussions because we've had a look at the big picture and what we need to do in the future. Okay, we haven't done that yet, or we're just starting to do that. We need to do that with more urgency than we ever have before. I think the days of getting to the boundary and saying, let's have that next few hectares or just outside there and we'll have R2 there and HT1 there, are long gone. I think we need to take a strategic look at what the future size of Hamilton is, and that's what's missing from here. I know the Deputy Mayor was concerned about the 100-year looking ahead, but what I would say to him is that those who were on the council in 1989 when they approved the miniature boundaries around the city only had a 100-day view. They should have had a 100-year view back then, and we wouldn't be in this pickle. I don't know who was on the council at the time. I don't know. I have no idea who was Deputy Mayor at the time either. But we've got in that problem. I don't think we're actually at odds in the sense of where we want to end up. It's just the process of going there. It's been really slow, and we've confined ourselves to looking at tiny wee pockets around the place, which that's what's putting us in this problem. And we have to start taking that urgently, and we have to back all of our representatives that are talking with the surrounding councils about that, and they will not want to lose land, i.e. rates, income. I mean, there's no way you can sugarcoat that, but it's going to have to happen at some stage. And it's not really Tamahere, even though that is a favourite of the Deputy Mayor, that we have to look at. It's some of these other areas. And where are we going to have people living in 100 years' time? If we don't look at that, we're not doing good planning.
Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mayor. Andrew, I fully support the approach of staff, and thank you for the good report and looking forward to the full information. It's really important that we do get all the information that we require. Less haste, more speed, sometimes, as the saying goes. I think we've got to remember that this must be seen together alongside the regional economic opportunities. We need to understand not only what is current demand or what is the current trend, but what the future opportunities are around using industrial land. How much of this will be heavy industrial land, light industrial land, logistics, those kinds of things are really important to Hamilton going forward, because that's what a strong economy is going to be based on. And a strong economy is what's going to help people into their affordable housing as well through jobs. So this is all, in my view, connected, and we shouldn't see it as separate. I will just make the point also that we are in competition, whether we like to use that word or not, with both Waikato District and Waipa for the development of economic opportunities on our industrial land. And in fact, we've seen some movement in that area. We've seen what's happening up north towards Pōkeno. We've also seen what's happening around the airport hub, with Waipa putting some of their industrial land to good use quite quickly and quite recently. So, you know, let's not be too tardy in terms of our response of getting, we certainly shouldn't be pushing off all our industrial land. We need to create opportunities, the right opportunities for our city. And that's the sort of thing that I'm interested in hearing about in future updates. A little bit like Councillor O'Leary mentioned in the workshop yesterday, we have to have a futurist approach. You know, how do we build the very best city going forward? And this is part of that debate from my point of view. So thank you to the staff for the work so far. I think it's quite an important and exciting opportunity for our city.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. And this will sound a little bit like a repeat what you've heard before, but I do understand, Dave, and particularly your concerns, Andrew. But my concern is that I don't think that those B and C address the key issue of this paper, which was the deferred industrial land.
Councillor Mallett, but I didn't debate B and C because it was taken off, and I would have had some comments. So are we allowed to debate B and C even though it's off the table?
What's your point of order?
That was my point of order.
It's not,
What's the
Missed
subject?
opportunity, Mayor Andrew.
it's not relative, is that you?
Now they're gone, now you've made it even worse. Look what you've just done.
Okay, continue, Councillor
Okay.
Gary.
And I do appreciate that, I totally understand Andrew seeking to get some formal, and I may be putting words in his mouth, and I don't want to do that, getting some formal support for his discussions. He has done the right thing, he has advised us, and I think he's got a tacit acknowledgement that he needs to continue on, so we're not trying to stop that. My concern was that the discussions and work around the 100-year solution was going to slow down the work that needs to happen in the decade, the 10-year issue that we've got with regard to a lack of industrial land. So my position on this is not against what Andrew is trying to do. It is just I don't want that to slow down us trying to address the issue, which is Te Rapa North deferred industrial land and our shortage of industrial land in the city. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll just wrap up just to say that what I was trying to get support from elected members is on the talks that are already happening. So it was about continuing where we're heading. And I think you've very clearly, the tables clearly understands where we're heading and what we're doing anyway. And the staff will bring back a report, as they've said, in the next couple of months, just to firm up on this. And at that stage, we will, I don't see any real pushback here on where we're heading or any alarm bells ringing. And we will continue in the meantime and waiting for that report to be put together in the using the correct process and going down the correct path to directly broaden up what this paper's about. So this paper's really a start for where we're heading. So thank you, Blair, for the huge amount of work you're doing on this. And I know that there's just a huge amount of work coming together on this, and as elected members, you need to be a part of this and included in the journey, which we've begun today. So, and as we've already said earlier, there has been a briefing on this as well, just to clearly lay out the bigger picture for Hamilton's boundaries. So, so we'll go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried unanimously.
I'm just going to continue to item 13 if we can. I just want to get to the public excluded before we stop, so we're nearly there. So Calvin Powell, or Jen, I think you're on this paper. So we'll take the report as read, moved by myself. It's coming, we're coming to it. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, sure. So, okay, we'll stop until. Sorry. Well, we're right there. So, okay. So we've moved by Councillor Leo, seconded by Councillor Dave. We'll go to questions on that paper, paper 13. No, Angela, I wouldn't do that. So it's item 13, page 117. I think we will take a break. 10 minutes. Sorry, guys. 11:35. We'll come back.
you.